Welcome to Unbiased and on the Fence. This is Paranormal Frequencies, and back by popular request. And let's see here. Yeah, got you on the screen. What is up, Aaron? How's it going? Welcome back.
Thank you very much for having me back, guys. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man, it was a great discussion last time, and you've started all these cool series. I know that the audience will want to hear about. So, Sherry.
Hey, Aaron. Hey, chat room.
You're in the chat room? Okay.
No, not yet. I was just saying hi to him.
So, man, it's a lot going on with, let's see. It was A Course in Miracles that you just started, and then I just found out I missed the whole Law of One thing last week. So I was excited when I saw the video come out today where you're going to be working with on the Course of One, or A Course in Miracles. And really, I didn't know anything about it being channeled and all that stuff. So that was all brand new to me, man. So I've learned more today than I started reading it a while back, but I can't really even remember what it was. Isn't it like you read something a day or something, and then it takes you a year to get through it, or is that a different book? Or
There's 365 lessons in the course. So the course is like the size of the Bible. It's freaking enormous. There's 600 or something pages of like material, like teaching material. Then there's a section on the 365 lessons, and then there is a section for teachers, giving them like what the definitions of all the different verbiages, because it uses like traditional Christian language and stuff.
Right.
So yeah, it's a huge book, but it's the kind of book you want to just read your entire life, never put it down.
Yeah, I noticed how a lot of the teachings come out in sort of a Christian vernacular, I guess, to be,
Yep, very much.
A lot of times people get offended or whatever, but I noticed that when I was reading through Saint Germain's information, and it was, it was very Christianly sounding, but very, practical as well, but in a language that would be comfortable for Christians.
Yeah, the book is actually supposedly channeled from Jesus. Jesus is like the author of the course, so it uses Christian language. It's kind of interesting because in order to build the thought system that it does in the book so well, it kind of has to use the language that it uses, where it's like the atonement, salvation, the Holy Spirit, all these different terms that are very Christian in orientation. It kind of redefines them in a way that's, anyone from any spiritual discipline could read it, just like the Tao Te Ching or something. It's so remarkable and so ingenious the way it's transcribed, and I can't recommend it enough for people.
That's very cool, because in my mind, I actually have a lot of the same Christian thought that I had when I was a Christian, but I understand it a completely different way.
Yep.
Like even the main ones, like, Jesus is the way, the truth and the life, or the light. Yep. That's, people remember it differently. But that's, thinking of him as a role model and how you should act and be. And so I see it like that scripture still works for me. But it's not like as a sacrifice or, this sort of doctrinal way of looking at Jesus,
Yep.
I found a lot of that stuff from like Edgar Casey's stuff. Like I just kind of changed I went from like being Baptist to like what I call like a Gnostic Christian, because I still, kind of incorporate them together, and you kind of see this like starting to like trend throughout maybe everything is gonna like come together just perfectly for everybody.
Because a lot of people, when you're raised Christian, you feel like you're letting go of something if you let go completely. You know what I mean? It feels like
Oh, yes.
it's been like the sort of in your blood. I mean, I've got, like, my grandfather was a preacher. My mom was a minister. So it's like I've got this long lineage of Christianity that
Yeah.
now I've sort of I understand it a completely different way. I'm trying to be more Christ-like. But so I haven't really let go of it, and I'm okay with that. But it's fundamentalist Christians might have a problem with it, like you backslidden or whatever.
Oh, for sure, yeah. Yeah, the Christian, the New Testament, the gospel message, all that stuff. It's so remarkable the way that it transforms before your eyes when you change, your perspective of it.
Oh my gosh,
It's so multi-layered, and when you come at it from a literalist point of view, which is how fundamentalism approaches it, you're literally blind to all the things Jesus is saying. And that's, kind of why he spoke pretty much only in parables and stories, because he's like, yo, he who has an ear to hear, let him pay attention, right? Meaning, like, only some people are going to understand what I'm saying, because there's a really deep truth here that you have to go beyond the surface level. And once you do, man, Jesus transforms into the most amazing ascended master that has ever lived, in my opinion.
Oh, I totally agree, man. And that's why I've read the Bible dozens of times, because I kind of, come across an idea like, did he really say he came to be the sacrifice? And
no.
And I'm all thinking this. I'm like, I've got to read through it again and see what he says and really pay attention to that. And it's like, there's a few things where he's like, at the communion, this is my body. But I'm like, but that still works with him saying, I know I'm going to die, and take these teachings and let them live on and remember me, but not as a sacrifice. He didn't say it that way. And you would think if that's the most important thing, which it is sort of, if you're like, mainstream, I guess.
Yeah.
He would have said it, right?
Right. Yeah. Jesus was, you have to understand, like, what position he was speaking from. Because we're identified with our egos. We read Jesus's teachings and say, oh, he was speaking from his ego. He meant he, the physical person, is the way, the truth, and the life. So there you go. You got to blah, blah, blah. But the funny thing is, I don't think many people know this, but Jesus never said any of the stuff about himself that the church teaches about him, such as, I'm going to die to have God forgive your sins, or I'm the atoning sacrifice. You should confess me as Lord and Savior. None of that stuff came from Jesus. He didn't say any of that.
In fact, sometimes he said just the opposite. Like when they said, good man or whatever, why do you call me good? Only God is good. And he said specific things like that. Don't call anyone father. You've got one Father in heaven, yet, you go to church and they're like, hello, Father. And
right. We still do it.
I know, right when I first found out-of-body experience, and I've told people this before, but, the first thing I did was start looking in the Bible, and I found all kind of stuff about it, like whether I was in the body or out of the body, I know not. Right. Or the Lord picked me up and set me down in the desert, and I saw this, that, and the other. But I think all the experiences people had in the Bible, were from like meditative states, like altered states of consciousness and stuff. And I remember one other thing I wanted to add real quick was that, not to keep bringing him up, but Edgar Casey had said that, like, he'd learned that, like, reincarnation was like a real thing, or he was kind of told that in one of his sessions. And then he was told, he was struggling because he was so a Christian and everything. And they told him, just go back and read it again and you'll see that it is in there, and then he found the scripture that said, like, like, who sinned this child or his father that he would be born blind, things like that. Right. You know what I mean? So, it's just really interesting.
I actually did a video with a friend of mine on the case for reincarnation in scripture, not necessarily like scripture making a case for it, but where you can see, like you just said, these kind of themes of the ancient world that they believed in this kind of stuff. But we sort of just block it out from our understanding in the current day and age. But there's no doubt about it that the ancient world, the Jewish world, believed in a form of reincarnation.
Yeah, even in church, man, I remember they said, well, he came, it was John the Baptist. He came in the spirit of Elijah. It's like sort of like it's said in a way that doesn't sound like reincarnation.
Dude, Jesus asks,
when you think about it,
Jesus asked his disciples, he's like, who do you think I am? And they're like, oh, some people say that you're Elijah. Some people say you're Jeremiah. Some people say you're this prophet.
Right.
It's like, what?
Right. Why would they say that? Right. Totally, man. Yeah.
They thought he was Elijah reincarnated.
Exactly.
Or Moses reincarnated.
And then they end up saying that John the Baptist, first Elijah would come before him, and he says, well, they don't realize that he did, and they
Right.
actually beheaded him, and they're talking about John the Baptist. It actually
Yep.
says he was talking about John the Baptist.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so it's there. I don't know why there's
They
such a problem with it.
they believe that the spirit of Elijah basically reincarnated as John the Baptist,
Exactly.
which probably he did.
Right, and that's
Why
right in the
not?
Bible. So I don't see a problem with reincarnation. I do see why people in mainstream Christianity do, just because of how they teach. But it's biblical in my opinion.
It contradicts everything that they teach about heaven and hell and all that, so they can't afford to believe in it.
Right, because then it kind of goes back to the fear. When
Right.
you're talking about the man-made religion, it's sort of there to funnel you to them instead of to God. Come to
Right.
us.
Yep.
We're the go-betweens. You need to support us. We're the storehouse or whatever.
Give us 10% of your money,
Exactly.
which is totally not biblical either.
So I like the fact that this is written in a way that the whole A Course in Miracles is written in a way that can people can sort of start to see things a little bit differently as they're beginning to wake up.
Yeah, for sure. It's very practical. It's very no nonsense, and it just comes straight at you. It doesn't leave any room for discrepancy, which is why it's so effective. I think it lays out the groundwork, the blueprints, crystal clear for you, so there's no doubt. Like if you are thinking thoughts that produce fear or separation, you're in the thought system of ego. If it produces love, oneness, unity, joy, you're in the thought system of the spirit. There is no middle ground.
Mm. And I guess your emotions are sort of an indicator of where your mind's at, right?
You got it. Yeah.
So that's amazing.
Pretty cool system.
Yeah. So what does it do over the whole year? I mean, that's seems like a long time to stretch it out. Is it like prayers you do daily, or how does it break down each day? Kind of.
It's more of like a perceptual meditation.
Mm-hmm.
It's trying to reorganize your thought structure, your perception of reality. So it's literally designed to be like a 365 days to total liberation, total enlightenment.
Oh, nice.
So like the first day, it's just like very simple lessons that are teaching you how to re-envision reality, re-envision the way you see yourself with others. So it will say, give you like a lesson to repeat.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, like lesson 15 off the top of my head is to look at an object, phone, look at your hand, and look at it and repeat in your mind, this is an image that I have made. And you look at another object, you say, this is an image that I have made, and you kind of just meditate on it. It's all meditative. You have to let it sink in. You don't just like, this is an image, that's an image I made, okay, I'm done. Daily lesson, right?
It's sort of like you go about your whole day and kind of keep it in the back of your mind, I guess. Huh?
Totally, yeah. It'll also give you recommendations for like, do this 2 to 3 times throughout the day. Some lessons, it's like, do this once every half an hour, repeat the mantra, I could see peace instead of this. I could see peace instead of this, all throughout your day. And it literally reprograms your mind. It's pretty remarkable.
Wow. So it's like each day you just stack on another thing, huh?
Yep, totally. And they work off of each other.
Oh, very nice.
It's brilliant.
That's really the music approach, you kind of break a song down in little pieces and then, keep adding to it or whatever. So
100%.
Yeah. So I guess anything's great to learn that way. So it's really cool that it was broken down that way. Was it actually channeled in that fashion too?
Yeah, the story of how that book was channeled is pretty interesting. The lady was named Helen Schuckman, who was a psychologist and clinical therapist and psychologist at Columbia University. She was not Christian in orientation. I think she was agnostic or maybe even atheist. But her and her colleague, I don't know if it was her boyfriend or not, but they worked together, Bill Thetford. They were like, man, we want to come up with a better thought system, a better approach to psychosomatic therapy and stuff. And so I guess Helen Schuckman started receiving these messages and in her dreams, and she was having all these crazy experiences where this message wanted to come through. And I think one night she had a dream or a vision or encounter where a man was speaking to her, and she felt this tremendous love coming from this man, this being. And it said, I have a message to dictate through you. Will you allow me to use you? And she was like, I guess. So she didn't come to realize that was apparently Jesus talking to her until later in the book when she started writing, like, in the course it said it's first person, so Jesus is talking. And she's like, nice. Shit, this is like Jesus.
Man, that had to be so cool.
I mean, there's no doubt whatsoever that this is coming from a much higher intelligence when you read it. I mean, there is no book like it. There's no writings like it. It's every single sentence in the book of all 1,000 pages in it is profound and like full of wisdom. And you could just use that one line alone for the day, you know, have that be your lesson. It's amazing.
Oh wow, yeah, I'll definitely. Yeah, you've inspired me to look into it more. People tell me all the time, they're like, "Oh, you haven't checked that? You should check it out." And I think
Yeah.
even Eileen teaches it, or I think a few different people. Debbie Hazelton teaches it. She's gone through the course or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so I know it's good stuff, and what I read it was great. But I just, I'm so busy, it's hard to stay at
For
it for some
sure.
reason.
Here's what I would recommend for you or anybody listening who wants to get into it. It's incredibly long, right? So don't think of it as like a book you're going to read. Think of it as like daily spiritual practice or meditation or whatever. So like the lessons are the first like 60% of the book is all teaching, and it's like these little paragraphs of individual lessons talking about a certain subject. So like I would just read like, whatever you feel like doing, 3 to 5, paragraphs, and then go to the teaching or the lessons in like the second half of the book and just do like one lesson a day. It'll take you like, 5 minutes to do it. And then, throughout your day, you repeat it and just use it as something like a material for you to work on throughout your year.
That's a great idea.
You
Yeah,
can't
then
read it
doesn't seem
fast,
so overwhelm. Yeah, it doesn't seem overwhelming when you think of it that way.
Totally.
I work at a addiction center, and they actually use the Course in Miracles at one of them and have good results with it.
Yeah, I mean, it really works if you apply it 100%.
That's really cool. So I really enjoy the Law of One, and I guess that's just completely different than.
Have you read Law of One, all of it?
Yeah, I have. It's
Nice.
amazing, and you can tell, like you were saying about the Course in
Oh
Miracles,
my
you can
gosh,
tell
yeah.
it definitely came from a higher source. It's just amazing. Even I was just telling Sherry about towards the end when the I can't even think of her name. She had tried to record herself singing, and the tape player messed up, and they asked what happened, and he was like, the mechanism inside the tape player did not catch the it said something real technical, and it's like,
Super
how did you
technical.
know that? I just went and looked or something. So
Well,
it's really strange.
What's even more amazing is how, like, kind of like I think it's like the last 10 to 12 sessions are kind of mostly about their health, Carla's health, Jim's health,
Yeah.
Don's health.
And then moving or something, I think.
And moving, yeah.
Yeah.
But I've listened to some interviews with them over the years on YouTube where they talk about when they were channeling and everything. And Jim McCarty was saying in one interview that like they ask Ra all these questions about Carla, like what's causing this, what's causing that. And he gives them these incredibly detailed answers.
Yeah.
And one of them was an allergy she has, and he said she's allergic to the milk butter or something like that. And she didn't know she was. And sure enough, they go to the doctor, get an allergy test, and butter comes up. And they're like, we didn't even know she was allergic to butter. And that was just one of the many things that they actually had confirmed through doctor's visits that Ra told them. I mean, some of them are really, really like detailed, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I really love it. And it seems like they touched on anything you can think of, from the pyramids to, UFOs, and, even they got into the government. Wasn't it in the government where they were saying that we'd achieved half the speed of light? Was that in the Law of One, or was that something?
I don't recall. I don't know if that's in Law of One.
Yeah, because I went back and, like, after I read through it, then I went and, like, hit the topics, because you can go and just, like, search by the topic on the website. And so anybody that wants, I think it's law1.info or.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can just go
Law1.info.
there. Yeah, and plus there's some that you can look on YouTube, and you can just, if you're working, you want to listen, someone reads it, so there's so many ways to listen to that. Is it like that with A Course in Miracles?
Yeah, there is an audiobook version of that on YouTube that I've seen, but you could do it that way. I like to read it because I like to also highlight things in my Kindle, and then you can go through your highlight section, and there'll just be like a boatload of, quotes that could really literally change your state of consciousness. If you're like in a difficult, you're feeling depressed or angry or something, you need like some clarity, I just go to that. I read through some quotes, and it's just like, I call them coursegasms. I'll read it and go, oh my God, it's so good.
That's perfect. Yeah, I'll definitely need to have that as a go-to thing. So
Same with Law of One, though.
So we were talking about the Mandela effect. We hadn't really. It's a topic that everyone loves here because everybody's kind of got hit in one way or another, and it's such a trippy thing. Let me ask you a couple of new ones and see how they affect you.
Okay.
How would you spell Kevin Costner?
Off the top of my head, I would like the whole name or just the
Yeah,
last name.
does he have a T in his last name or not?
I was gonna say he does.
Okay, for a lot of us that's a new way. So it is Costner now,
Yeah.
like cost. That's a pretty trippy one. What was another new one, Sherry? What was the one that we just?
OJ.
Yeah. Well, gosh, how old were you when O.J. Simpson?
Yeah, it's true. He was a baby, probably.
Wasn't it in '89?
I think he was. It was a police chase. Yeah, it was right around 90, wasn't it? Seems
Yeah, I would
like
have
I
been
was
like a year old or something.
Oh, okay. What's a newer one, Sherry?
Um.
We just had one that came
Oh,
up.
that's the I Love Rock and Roll one.
Oh
No,
yeah, I love rock and roll.
no,
So
that
yeah, a lot of them are older. But even the like you remember the JFK one the original way, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
because they showed it every year, and it was like sort of the most graphic thing you've seen, and it wasn't in color. Do you remember it being in black and white originally and all
Yeah. Of
that?
course. Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah, a lot of people, for them, it's always had six people in the car. It's always been in color, and it's like mind blowing.
Wow. I remember four distinctly.
Yeah, me too. I remember, the first lady was the only lady in the car. I would have known if there was another lady in the car, and so I remember the driver, and
That's so weird.
yeah, and it's weird because I remember the governor being right in front of the president and getting shot and all that, but he was in the front seat. He was all the way
Right.
next to the driver, and
Right.
and I remember watching documentaries about the driver. It would look like he was turning around and shooting them, but now there's a row of people between there. I don't think.
it actually looks like Jackie shot him. Some people are saying,
Yeah, it does kind of look like that now.
yeah, like she.
Yeah, Jackie's different. She's different than.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, and what's funny is they had this guy that was analyzing the footage real closely, the original footage,
Yeah.
and he says he always remembers six people in the car, but Jackie has changed for him, so he didn't notice.
Huh.
Like, I mean, he like for him it had always been six people in the car, but he says Jackie's different. She's doing something different. And he could explain what she did before because he analyzed it so closely. But anyway, it's just weird, man. That's a weird one.
Yeah.
You know what
That's
you
so
ought,
bizarre.
you know what you ought to do, Aaron? I mean, I don't know if you like to go to the movie or not, but I just saw that movie yesterday, and it's awesome.
What movie?
It's like Yesterday.
Oh, it's called Yesterday. I thought you said I saw a movie yesterday.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, yeah. Okay. No, it's about this guy that basically there's like an EMP strike or something. I don't know. All the electricity goes out and he wakes up and the Beatles don't exist anymore and he starts playing their music and then, they're like, oh, that's such a good song you wrote. And he's like, I didn't write it. Paul McCartney did or whatever.
Whoa.
So anyway, it goes on from there. But, there was just we're not really talking about it yet because of spoiler alerts, but there was some synchronicities in there for me that I felt in the movie theater, and so did my friend who I had showed the Mandela Effect to. It was almost like it was written for me or something when I'm sitting in there, It was just too weird. Very
pretty trippy.
How bad do you wish you could ask Ra about the Mandela effect?
Oh, that would be awesome.
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, that would absolutely be amazing.
So curious what he would say.
And I've heard so many things, as to what it is, like in sessions and stuff. And I think it's all connected, you know what I mean? Like a shift in human consciousness is going on and like a thinning of the veil and
Man,
just so many theories,
the universe is so intricate and complex. It could be anything, really.
Totally. Yeah, a lot of people jump right on with D-Wave computers and CERN or the Satan or something scary, But I don't really think so, man.
No, I don't believe in that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I know they're probably up to something. I just don't think they're causing this,
Yeah.
So where do we go with this A Course in Miracles then? What do you have coming up next with it?
So I'm doing the Law of One and the Course in Miracles kind of back to back each week, or bi-weekly, rotating.
Mm-hmm.
great.
Each of these, man, each video is so much to put together. But I'm so passionate about it. I love it. But like the 7 densities video took me 25 or 30 hours of between writing the whole outline, recording the video, and then editing the video. But it was worth it because the response was way more amazing than I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of people really hungry for that information out there. So that's been really cool to see.
Yeah, it is. See, I did a whole bunch of Law of One early on, and but they don't get views anymore. So it's like you have to sort of get it out there and.
Well, I think that's really because it's not at the top or current,
Right.
Unless someone's
But it's timeless. You
feeling
know
like,
what I mean?
no, I know, but people just want to click on like what comes up in their subscriptions or whatever. And
Oh, I get it. I should
Right,
probably just
right.
start reposting them.
No, yeah, if you
just like,
repost stuff, you'll get more views for sure.
and
Yeah.
just like with me with the Law 1 stuff and the Saint Germain stuff that you did, I tried watching it, and you like watch a few of them, get busy, and then say I'm going to go back to that, and then you know how it goes.
Yeah, because it's so
For
far
sure.
back, you sort of just forget about it or whatever.
Yeah.
So you're going back to Law of One then this coming week, huh?
This week will be another Law of One, yeah.
What do you plan on tackling, or do you know yet? Or
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be on the Logos.
oh, okay.
Are you familiar with that topic in Law of One?
Yeah, sort of how it starts from the galactic sun and then like fractals off into like lower and lower logos or whatever. But
That's
yeah,
so
it's
interesting because when that Mandela effect started, that was something that I saw right away, was that like logos were changing and the logos, and I started making these connections. I was trying to like get them out and tell people that had like Mandela effect channels and stuff, but nobody was really getting what I was saying. But it's just so
well, it's scary for a lot of people, so they tend to go to the scary route. I was
Yeah.
always just excited about it. I was shocked at first, but it took me a while to see it as a positive thing. But once I did, all these people started coming together of like mind and open minded, and
then like the name of it with the Mandela and the Mandorla, and then you made the Vesca Pisces video. Can you explain that to him?
yeah, and even putting it in my logo on accident and everything was sort of a neat little accident that came up early on. So it let me know that I like sort of channeled it in a way or whatever, and didn't realize it at the time. But and then the other connection with that is you realize that man of the effect, like de la, like de la soul of the sun, so man of the effect, and so I tend to think of it as a positive thing. I think it's exciting. I don't really stick on it too much. I love to check them out or whatever, but I feel like it was sort of an alarm clock to wake up to understanding that reality is not what we think it is, because it sort of forced me to clear off the chalkboard and say, wait a minute, we need to start over because this doesn't fit into the way I think reality works. So and I think for a lot of people it is a wake-up call, while other people really don't even need it. They're sort of already on the right path, so
when I had first found it, I just thought I thought, wow, because I was very Christian, and I was like, well, I thought maybe they were practicing to like change the Bible, and then the Bible got changed. But for some reason, deep down in my gut, I didn't feel like it was bad, and I've learned to trust my feelings like that over time. And then it just, I don't know, it just got to where the only time I got really freaked out was when one time I had went to a restaurant and the logo had changed. So I'm real inquisitive.
Oh yeah, tell them about that, man. That was, you got to hear this, man.
So I go to this restaurant. Me and my mom would go to this restaurant all the time. She was going to the doctor a lot, and we'd go all the time. And so one time, like the third or fourth time we went, the name of it had changed from Chewy's CHEWYS to CHUYS. The colors on it had changed. The whole thing had changed. And then we're in there eating, and she's noticing like the rice looks different, like it's got these little red and green things in it, and they didn't bring a certain dip that they just like give you. Everything was different. But anyway, I got home and I'm looking at the receipt, and the logo just looks so weird. And I was like, I'm gonna call them. And I couldn't remember my waitress's name. And I get the hostess on the phone, and I was like, did the name of your store change? And I told her everything what I just told you.
Yeah.
And then she goes, oh my God, you're like, her name's Gabriella. Shout out to Gabriella at Chewy's. She's like, you're really freaking me out because I had a dream that I pulled up to work the other day, and that the logo looked like what you're saying it changed from,
Whoa.
and what happened with me was something, I went back to this little fear thing for a minute, for like an afternoon, where I was feeling like, oh my God, they've hacked everybody's brains and their dreams, and they're making us all think that we like, so that was a little thing for me, but got through it.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, ego loves fear,
Right.
And anything that's promoting fear is coming from ego. And once you really understand who you are, what reality is, that you're infinite, eternal being, and You've already been incarnating millions of times. You'll do it millions of more times. There's nothing to fear. Like, oh, so if the government has some scheme to kill us all, I don't know. Like, cool, whatever. Like,
and move on to the next round, right?
Yeah, what you really are can't be harmed. So
we'll get them next time.
Yeah.
So you know what I love talking about is, what's your take on like synchronicities? Like real.
I think you did a video about synchronicities we're talking about, didn't you?
I have not done a video on that, actually, no.
Okay.
A little bit of Law of One gets into that, actually. There's a part where there's a hawk that, something like a hawk comes and lands on right in front of the kitchen window. Yeah. And he had never even seen a hawk before, like there, and it sat on the windowsill and like stared through the window at him or something, and then flew away. And so he asks Ra, like, was that a synchronicity? Was that a message? And he was like, Ra was like, yeah, that was your higher self sending you a rather obvious message, which sometimes happens. And I've had some things like that happen myself.
It seems like the more you look for them, the more you see them. Is it like that for you? Yeah,
for sure. It's really interesting because after I read that section of Law of One, this was back in January. It's my second time reading it. I was walking home, and I live in an apartment complex, and I'm on like the last wing on the very top floor, the 5th floor, really high up. And I'm at the very end of the wing, and it's a big open like doorway with a railing at the end of it. So there's like usually a big wind tunnel blowing down there. So I've never seen any birds anywhere around my apartment complex up here at this level. And I'm walking home, it's like 10:30, I'm on my phone, and I hear this tweet of a bird. And I didn't think much of it. I keep walking, and then I hear it again like 10 seconds later. And I look around, like, is a bird up here? I don't see a bird anywhere. So I keep walking, I get to my door, and I hear this chirp, chirp, super loud right next to my ear. And I look over, and there's a blue jay sitting right on the railing, staring at me. And I locked eyes with it, and it chirped two more times, and then it flew away.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And I was like, what in the hell? Because I literally just listened to that in the car on the way home, that a bird sat in front of his window. So I took that as a message from my higher self.
For sure. Yeah, that's a definite one there. I mean, you can't, just the timing of it is beyond,
It's hard to be a coincidence.
I've had so many synchronicities in my life over since 2015 that I've just kind of learned that, it's just almost like my whole life is like just me, and everybody else is like part of my story or something, you know what I mean? And then it made me think about the word history, like his story or whatever. It's so like that. And the more that I would write them down sometimes, and it would happen more and more and more. And just the craziest things happen to me, and they're so cool. They're all like little miracles. And I got to where I almost live in this little flow thing that when you tell people about it, you'd sound crazy. You don't know where to start with like aliens and, and like I said, I used to write them all down, and then it got to where they're just happening like 4 or 5 times a day for different subjects in my life, and it just makes you kind of feel really guided,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what it is, in my opinion, is that it's some sort of mechanism of law of attraction happening.
Yeah, definitely.
You're attracting things into your field based on what you're vibrationally matching, right? So that could look to you. Carl Jung talked about this. I think actually Carl Jung came up with the term synchronicity.
Exactly. Yep.
For things that are beyond coincidence. And it's sort of like it could mean any number of things, infinite number of things, but there's no doubt that synchronicity is a real phenomenon for sure.
Yeah, it's sort of that same thing when, and I think some of it might be like bleed over from telepathy. Like, synchronicity could be like you think of somebody and then the phone rings, but it could also be some kind of connection, telepathic connection happening there too. So I think there might be some overlap between those, because I've been seeing an uptick in what I would think of as more telepathic stuff happening lately. I don't know if it's the energies or what, but it's just been strange, way more than usual.
I talked about that actually in the Law of One video I posted last week on the 7 densities. It's really due to the shift into 4th density, in my opinion, which is what Ra talks about. Our planet in 2012 was this really remarkable year where it was a pivotal time for the planet, and nobody really knew why or what it was from, but had the Mayan calendar and all that stuff kind of pointing to this being a big important event in the planet's history. And what Ra explains is that this he actually said it was in 2011, but it's a planetary shift from third density to fourth density. So what that means is when the collective consciousness of the world becomes 51% fourth density understanding, then the planetary frequency officially becomes fourth density, right? And so when that happens, that means that basically the planet is now hospitable for evolving fourth density bodies, learning, the frequency of the planet literally is fourth density now. So love and understanding, unity, oneness, that's the theme of fourth density. So that's why you see this huge increase in, telepathy and channeled works being written, massive increase in technology that unifies the planet, social media. We've seen an enormous amount, unbelievable amount of social justice reform since 2012. You've got, gay rights, gay marriage, women's rights, Black Lives Matter, global warming, just awareness about big pharma and Monsanto, all these things are coming into the collective awareness because of social media. And so this is how the world becomes more and more unified and less divided as fourth density begins. And so according to Ra, fourth density is like a 30 million year cycle to complete on average to fifth density. I think his planet made the shift in like 5 million years or something. They were very, very unified.
So wait, so from fourth to fifth, because it's been a couple of years since I watched Law of One.
Yeah.
How long of a shift are we looking at? You're saying 30 million years?
So Ross says that the average lifetime for a fourth density being, so that's an entity that's living in a physical fourth density, or you could say...
Oh, okay, I follow you.
Yeah, a green ray body. We're living, this is a yellow ray body here.
Mm-hmm.
Average lifetime for a fourth density body is 90,000 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we're like 70 years to 100 years. They're...
Yes.
Wow.
Apparently, humans used to live for like a lot longer, like hundreds of thousands of years ago or 1 million years ago or something. But
yeah, we hear about it in the Bible, like at 1,000 years. But I've heard like kings ruling for 15,000 years and stuff like that. When you get into the Anunnaki history and stuff. So
yeah, I mean, there's a decent amount of historical records, ancient world type of records, or just writings of people that live to be like 900 years old. And
can you imagine how exhausting that would be?
I know, right? But it's interesting because Ra explains how it's sort of a direct correlation to the amount of he calls it catalyst that's present. So the reason that third density is literally like a flash in the pan, like twinkling of an eye compared to all the other densities. But that's because it's so intense in catalyst. So in a sense, you could say like this is as bad as it ever gets for us in the universe. Fourth through seventh density are all spent. So third density is the choice, where you choose which polarity you resonate with the most. Service to
self or service to others, right?
Yep. And you can't graduate to fourth density positive unless you're 51% or more positively oriented. And you cannot graduate to fourth density negative unless you are 95% or more negatively oriented. And he explains
Genghis
that
Khan was the one that was able to do that, right?
Yeah, there's been a number, but it's very, very rare. It's very difficult because you have to be, blindingly committed to that path in order to sustain it, because the nature of the negative path is it's chaos, right? It's a very high amount of spiritual entropy. And so the positive path is the opposite. It's spiritual harmony. It's low entropy. So it's much easier to sustain the positive path and to polarize up the densities of the positive path. But the negative entities have a much more difficult time polarizing up the negative path because it takes relentless work and relentless blocking out of the positive light, of the positive polarity.
The positive just seems to be natural in a way.
If you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, though. If you're like all about service to self, then even at the top level of those running, that we typically frown on or whatever, and feel like they're always up to something. They're like service to self as a group, but as soon as like some of the stuff we've even seen in the news, one of them gets to a point where it's us, if it's me or them of the group, they'll turn on them. So, and Ra kind of got into that. Like, there's a certain disintegration that is bound to happen within the service to self group, and they can't. It's like it's just too hard for them to sustain that forever, you know. So,
yeah, he says that the negative path cannot progress past 6th density. Once they get to 6th density, like early 6th density, they pretty much concede to the positive path and reverse their polarity after obviously a lot of internal struggle and
it's so funny
healing.
that you say that. I've literally seen that, I think. You know, like
seen what?
State. What he's talking about. I just have seen it.
Yeah.
Well, we see it in little glimpses in our 3rd density for sure with people. I mean, somebody who goes from being an incredibly selfish person, sort of like the Dr. Scrooge story or Mr. Scrooge story. Mm-hmm. You know, he's like this horrible person, and then he has this wake-up call where the ghost of Christmas past leads him and shows him the error of his ways.
Which is totally not out of body, by the way. Okay.
Also has a lot of that for sure. And that's kind of what a negative entity has to do, because what Ross says is that the negative path sees the heart chakra, the green ray, which is the chakra of love. They see love as completely useless, like a waste of time. It doesn't actually get you anywhere. And so they want to learn wisdom and the higher, ways of manipulating consciousness so that they can enslave and dominate and control other entities. And so for the positive path, I talk a little bit about this in the video, but I'm going to do a whole video on the concept of a social memory complex. And in the positive path, a social memory complex it actually begins in 4th density, late 4th density, where consciousness, like individual units of consciousness, like you and I, merge together as one, become one being, where all the memories and knowledge of both entities are added together, and they have access to both. And so they not only become more powerful, but they become more wise and more loving. And so this process of integrating consciousness continues all through the densities. And, even at some point, like 6th density, 7th density, social memory complexes, like entire planetary civilizations, will join together until you get to the 7th density, which is the gateway density. And Rod doesn't explicitly say this, but he says some things to hint at it. And just my intuition says that, 6th density, he says, is when you basically turn around in time and become the higher self to all your previous incarnations. And because at 6th density, you've already gotten all the polarization you can possibly get out of serving others. You've been doing that for millions of years, right? And so now in order to continue polarizing, you have to do something greater. So you become the higher self to all your previous lifetimes, and that's how you polarize to 7th density. And I think Ross says one life cycle for 6th density is 75 million years. Ross says that they're coming up for graduation in like 5 million years in the Law of One, so they're like pretty late 6th density. But what my suspicion is that once you get to 7th density, and Ross says they don't know much about 7th density because they haven't gotten there yet, right. But they said that our masters teach us some things about it. What I think 7th density is you become the logos of an entire solar system, and you have to serve as, in a sense, the higher self of an entire star system. Wow. Creating your own archetypes, creating your own blueprints and everything, and serving the creator in that way, because after that you merge back with the source, right? So what would be the last step before that? It's obviously the logos, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I think 7th density is.
See, you brought out archetype or whatever, and it kind of took me back to the whole tarot part of the book that I spent a lot of time in it trying to decipher it, and I wish they would have asked more questions or different questions at times.
I've studied that probably more than any other part of Law of One.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah.
But I feel like I still know the least about that.
Totally, yeah. It's unbelievably fascinating.
It is. And I want to know so bad. I'm like, come on, get it, but it's so deep, man. I've studied it. I've written it out different ways. I've tried to make charts and all of this to try to wrap my head around it, because I've got I'm just such a problem solver, and I can't wrap my head around that problem of deciphering all that there is. It's like I don't have enough data, if you will, to make sense of it enough, It's an incredibly
intricate and also very subtle concept, because when we're talking about archetypes, we're not talking about anything that we can point to. Right. Like Ross says a couple of times, don't mistake the manifestations of the archetypes for the archetypes themselves, such as the planets in the astrological system. The planetary bodies, Neptune, Mars, Venus, all the planets represent different aspects of the archetypal mind in astrology. He's like, but don't mistake the planets for being the archetypes, because they're not. The planets are the manifestations of the archetypes.
Yeah.
So the archetype itself is like a non-physical thing. It's like a substructure, a metaphysical structure in the universe that orients everything, but it can't be seen or touched physically. It can only be observed and experienced, which each one of us are right now, because all of us are a result of the archetypal mind.
That's funny. And, you know, here's one of those tie-ins, like you mentioned earlier, there's some overlap between A Course in Miracles and the Law of One. And that reminds me of what you were saying, where you're looking at something and saying, my mind is creating this, because everything we see is really created in the mind, and everything we hear, you know, it receives these vibrations, color and light and sound and all that, but it's put together within the mind, you know, so it's really all happening right there. And it sounds like that's the lesson it was trying to teach with the staring at objects lesson, I guess.
Yeah, actually, let me read it to you right here. It's lesson 15 if those of you have the course. It's really interesting the way it opens up. It says, it is because the thoughts you think appear as images that you do not recognize them as nothing. You think that you think them, and so you think that you see them. This is how your seeing was made. Try to find this one section. Oh man, I lost it.
That's so deep.
Oh, here it is.
You could meditate on that for a while.
It says, this is the function you have given your body's eyes. It is not seeing, it is image making. It takes the place of seeing, replacing vision with illusions.
Wow, that's deep, man.
Yeah, so what it's saying is, what's actually out there is just vibrating strings of light. That's all that actually is out there. But your mind, and based on your own conditioning, based on your own personal biases, interprets the vibrating energy as images, and then believes those images to be real, and then relates to them as real, which means that it could, you know, develop suffering and psychological stress and all these things that aren't actually there. There is no actual thing that you're looking at. It's all just energy. And so you're literally replacing real seeing with illusions that your mind creates.
That's deep. And you know, that was a struggle for me for a while, when people would say, oh, we're not really here, it's a simulation, or it's just a you know, an illusion or a deception. I think hologram of deception is what the wing makers call it. You know, and you know, if you go to sleep, sometimes you'll have a very real dream, you know, and you wake up, you're like, well, I know I was laying there all night and that seemed real, so how do I know I can't wake up out of this? You know what I mean?
Precisely. It's all just kind of like a fractal, you know, it's like each dimension
dreams within
is
dreams, sort of.
Exactly, yeah, it's multi-layered. But if we know dreams are, like, there is no such thing as real and not real, right? That concept doesn't even make sense. It's like, if you can experience it, it is real in some way, or either everything isn't real or everything is real. You know, no other definition makes sense. Or is
that
consistent.
gets me back to wasn't there a quote on the today's video title about real and A Course in Miracles? What was it? Do you know it right offhand? Or?
It's actually the opening line in the course. It's like the most famous line from the course. The whole purpose of the book states, is to end it's like the end of psychological suffering and the cultivation of true lasting inner peace, inner freedom. And so the opening line says, nothing real can be threatened, nothing unreal exists, and herein lies the peace of God. And so that kind of goes back to the lesson 15 I just read about your mind is replacing vision with illusions. It's helpful to know that, because when you think what you're seeing is real, then it takes on all of these fearful forms. Your ego can use it as ammunition against you. Oh no, look, you're going to die, you're in danger, this person's going to betray you, or whatever. You think you can be harmed by what you're seeing, when what you're seeing is just an extension, a projection of you. And so when you know that it's not ultimately real, only you are real, the experiencer, then you can't be afraid of anything. Fear is out the window. And that's where the peace of God comes in, is knowing, look, only what's real exists and nothing else is even real, so I don't have anything to fear.
You know, it's funny that you said that, because it's reminding me that, you know, I thought I had the peace of God all growing up in the real religious life, you know, but then I didn't find that peace you're describing, or, you know, not
quite
fear
the
death
opposite
anymore, until I left religion and left the fear behind. Then I found the real peace. It was so liberating, and I would have never expected it, you know. It's really weird.
Most churches do nothing but talk about the devil and what the devil's up to, and demons and demonic attacks and spiritual warfare. It's like super bizarre. You're
Yeah.
like, what about God though? You know, like, oh yeah, we'll get to him soon.
Well, I just want to say that the stuff that you've said tonight, Aaron's helped me a lot. Like, if you ever wondered if you help anybody, because I went through a lot of experiences that, and everybody will say that that's what you're experiencing, like something from yourself. And I'm like, okay, but why would I like attack myself spiritually and stuff like that? And everything that you said, like, clicked for me. It was really cool.
That's
And you know
awesome.
what? I always ask people, I'm like, have you ever jump scared somebody? Like, they're coming out the bathroom, you're like waiting there, and then, like, why did you do that? You're like, well, it was funny. And it's like, well, it's different and stuff. Well, maybe your higher self's having a little fun with you and you're taking yourself too seriously. You know what I mean? Because at the root of it, it really feels like you come to understand that, oh my gosh, I'm not a victim. No one's really after me. Nobody's out to get me.
Yeah.
And you rise above all that, and then you're like, oh wait, this is just sit back and enjoy the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll give you a really helpful analogy for why we experience suffering and painful things and all that. If you imagine, like, I actually mentioned this in the Law of One video, but the place and time we're in right now, think of it as sort of like a consciousness kindergarten. Like, we're literally in preschool right now, and the universe awaits us, but we have to graduate from this level, this density, make our choice of which polarity we want to progress up. And then the real journey kind of begins from there. And so imagine what you would do if you saw someone who was having a panic attack, freaking out at everything they see and just absolutely having a conniption fit. What would be the most loving thing you could do for them without infringing on their free will? Because free will is huge, and like Ra talks about in Law of One, free will is everything. Like, the creator wants this to be a true 100% organic experience, totally authentic, no outside bias or influence, no outside direction. The creator wants to evolve into itself organically, kind of like watching a movie. Like, you don't want to know the ending of the movie, right?
Right.
So that's kind of what the universe is like. So that's why we don't remember where we came from. So what would you do to somebody who's throwing a fit like that? Well, what I would say is probably the most loving thing you could do if they're being freaked out by everything around them is to just throw a blanket over them. Just throw a blanket over them, cover them up, and then let them kind of work their energy out. And then they'll calm down eventually and start breathing and go, oh, wait a second, nothing's actually attacking me. Maybe I'm more safe than I thought I was, right? And from there, they can begin to explore their environment. And anything they go touch, they're going to freak out. And they have to learn that they're safe, that everything's okay. And so in a sense, that's kind of what we're doing right now is we have the veil of forgetting. Rod talks about where we don't remember where we came from, who we are, what we're doing. We don't even know that we're evolving. We just know I exist, and here I am in this crazy, intricate universe full of 3D Technicolor. I have no idea how I got here. And so each time that you experience suffering, a painful event, you're actually learning a lesson, and your consciousness is expanding to get you to the point where you can be totally safe, totally secure in yourself, totally understanding of who you are, where you are, what's going on, and you can begin your journey through the universe. So we're in this kind of playground atmosphere right now where we think what's happening to us is real. We think that we're really suffering. But what we're learning through the suffering is that the true self cannot suffer. The true self is perfect and free and always has been. And what's suffering is the mind, is the ego, is the idea, the concepts. And so we have to learn to distinguish who we are from that. And life is doing that for us. The law of attraction is doing that for us. It's always bringing you the lessons that you need to learn next, right? So if you are very insecure, well, that insecurity is not real, right? It is an illusion that you are binding yourself to by believing that you are small, you are worthless. My evaluation of myself is truer than God's. I'm a piece of shit, whatever the belief is. And so because you believe
you draw that to yourself. Yeah.
You draw it to yourself. Law of attraction ensures that you do, because through experiencing that, your consciousness, or you could say consciousness, will eventually get to the place where it goes, I'm sick and tired of this. It goes, I want to be free. And that's the point where you transcend whatever that pattern is. And you have to do that with every single negative pattern that you have until eventually you reach total liberation, or what ancient teachers called enlightenment. And enlightenment is sort of like the graduation point for this density. Once you are totally free of illusions, like the Course talks about, then when you pass through this incarnation, you have now a fourth density available to you. But until you get to that point, you've learned all those lessons of third density, you actually can't incarnate into a fourth density body, according to Ra, because what Ra says is that, you know, your soul is kind of like a frequency, a vibration, and you have to harmonize with the density that you're going to. So if you're going to a density that's like this, but your soul's frequency is like this, Ra says that you literally wouldn't be able to exist in a body like that. It's a much higher vibration than you are, and so you'd get sick and you would die really quickly and whatever. So everything has to be within structured order or organization in our universe, and which makes total sense. I mean, we see that everywhere. Everything is harmony. Everything is, you know, based on entropy. So it's all pretty fascinating stuff. But Law of One breaks it down in a remarkable way that you can really understand.
Yeah, the Law of One is actually what made me start viewing things as catalysts across the board. So whenever something happens, I'm immediately like, why is this coming to me? What am I supposed to learn from this, you know?
Yep.
And really, and I think that helps you progress a lot faster, because now you're looking out for it. Your awareness is expanded to the point where you know, hey, I'm supposed to be learning something from this, rather than why is this happening to me? You know what I mean? There's a huge difference in there, and then you can find the deeper meaning of it much quicker than if you think it's just chaos coming at you, accident, you know, random stuff. You know,
100%. That's probably, I would say, the biggest helpful thing that Law of One has given me, like you said, is that understanding. And I'm definitely going to do an entire video on the subject of catalyst, because it's so fascinating. But when you start looking at all your quote unquote problems as catalyst for your growth, then man, you start evolving at an incredible pace. Like literally, once I started integrating those kinds of things in my spiritual journey, like, oh, it's not a problem, it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
It was like every week I was a different person. I didn't even recognize myself from the previous week. I was evolving.
I'm the same
so
way.
fast.
I feel like I've grown more in the last 2 years than my previous, you know, rest of my life. Seriously. I
You
mean,
probably have.
And it's been crazy how fast you can go when you start realizing that, you know, this is a lesson to learn. Let's figure it out and then move on, because, you know, you're not stuck on something for years, which a lot of us are.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. There's Ra talks about how before you, like, let's say you're an animal or something and you haven't quite gotten to third density yet. Before you get to the point of self-awareness, Ra says that your catalyst is sort of chosen for you by the higher self, just automatically, and it just puts you back in another incarnation, but you're not even aware of it. And you yourself have agreed to this. You're like, yeah, just keep putting me back there until I get to third density, and then we'll get together and talk about what catalyst I want. And this is all stuff that people who have NDEs talk about. Like, almost everyone who has an NDE says, oh yeah, I learned that you choose your lifetime, you choose your lessons, all this different stuff. So there's a lot of evidence for that too. But once you get to the point, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like, you know, we set up smaller catalysts at first, and if we get the hint, then we progress on, but they'll progressively get worse and worse till you end up with, you know, a horrible car accident or some kind of NDE, like what you're saying, to sort of have this transformative thing in your life. Because I've seen it with other people where they'll take it and get more negative as a result of the catalyst. Like, I mean, the catalyst is to push you one way or the other. But we don't always go the right way. Sometimes we get more cynical or pessimistic about life from a catalyst that comes about, you know, like, you know. But
you know, Aaron, I have a friend that it's to make a long story short, like, she was raped as a child, got pregnant. Her parents wanted her to keep the baby. She wanted to abort the baby. She has the baby, and then the baby killed her parents.
The ones that made her have them to begin with.
Right. And then she had like a dream, an out-of-body experience where she was shown that it was like a contract. And so, but I have noticed that she really is very spiritually developed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's so weird, because she knew that she had set that up. She was shown that she had set that up. And it was just so ironic that, you know, like that her child actually killed the two people that were trying to save him, you know. So her parents were murdered by her own son. And so, yeah.
It's hard to believe somebody would set something up like that, though, you know?
I know. I told her she's really tough.
Yeah, it's really interesting because our perspective is so different from this level. Like, if you've ever taken psychedelics, you kind of know what I'm talking about, where that state of consciousness is so incredibly full of bliss and joy and love that like you think you could do anything. You could tackle any problem. You're not worried about anything, right? And Ross says that like a lot of souls get a little bit overzealous in their catalyst because, again, once you get to self-awareness, you can start to choose your own catalyst and say, okay, I want to live a lifetime where I learn how to love myself. And so you might choose a lifetime where you're like abused and neglected and your parents leave you or whatever, because that is going to force you to love yourself. It's going to give you no choice. And the reason people choose such difficult catalysts is because third density is can be very difficult. It's also very beautiful and wonderful, but souls are very excited to get on with fourth through seventh density. So they're kind of in a hurry to speed up their catalyst. So some people will choose like extremely difficult lifetimes just to get it over with. They're like, I could learn 5 lifetimes worth of lessons in one lifetime, and it's going to be right. Kind of like a nightmare, right? Like let's put this scenario forward. Let's say I'm like, all right, Shane, you can earn as much money as you want based on how bad of a nightmare you have. So like, the maximum you can win is $1 billion, but it's going to be an unbelievably terrible nightmare. You're going to win $1 billion when you wake up. It's going to be over. You'd be like, give me the worst nightmare you can think of. Like, I don't care. Like, I want $1 billion, right?
Right.
When you're in the dream, though, you're going to go, who the hell put me here? Why is this happening? Well, I would never do this to myself, right?
Yeah.
But really, you did do it to yourself because from the other perspective, it's a flash in the pan. It's like you walked into a movie and you walked out of a movie. So from that universal perspective, it's so relative. It's impossible for us to grasp. But a good example is how Carla, the channeler, I didn't know this. I learned this in an interview I watched with her. She actually had a very profound near-death experience when she was 13, which I didn't know. So Carla, the channeler of Ra, Law of One, had a lot of health problems. She had like arthritis and all kinds of stuff, pancreatic issues and stuff. She died in 2011 from something, but she died when she was 13 from I want to say it was like a blood issue, a blood disease of some kind. Anyway, she died. She went to the afterlife, the astral plane, and she talks about how she had this vision of being on this hill, and she was walking up this hill, this beautiful, gorgeous scene, forests and trees and blue sky, and filled so at peace and all that stuff. And there's some sort of a doorway, and it opens or something, and this entity comes out, this being of light, and it was actually her in the future, her higher self. And it said, well, it was like very funny with her, very loving. It was like, so here's the deal. You bit off more than you could chew. You chose a lifetime with a little bit too much catalyst, which is why you're back here again so soon. So it said, it was like, it's up to you now. You can choose to stay here and we will reevaluate and we'll send you back and we can finish your lessons in 2 more lifetimes. Or you can just go back to this lifetime and get it over with and just finish. And so she was like, well, I don't want to go back 2 more times and do this. She was like, yeah, just send me back. I'll finish this one out. And I was like, okay, but just, it's going to be very difficult. You're going to have a lot of health issues, but you'll get through it. It'll be okay. And she was like, yeah, that's fine. And so she did. And so the idea is that like your higher self will not infringe on your free will. It will not tell you what catalyst to choose. It will give you pointers and tips, and you might say, hey, is it going to be too much for me to live a lifetime where I have cerebral palsy or something? And your higher self will not give you a yes or no. It's going to say, well, here's the possibility, probability vortex, and it'll kind of show you, here's all the possible outcomes of this. The decision's up to you. There is no wrong decision here. If you bite off more than you can chew, you'll come right back, right? And so a lot of people who are, there's people like this, all of us know people like this, really overzealous and ambitious and have all the right intentions, but they bite off more than they can chew. And some people, a lot of souls do that. So that's kind of the nature of it.
It reminds me of when we got the dancing game years ago, and everybody was learning it, and then I was like, what, I'm going to go to medium and try it out, and then go to hard, and I'm going to go to insane or whatever it was,
right.
Because if I can learn to do this, I'll be the coolest dad in the world, you know what I mean? so I'm like learning this, and so I had this big reward of like, look at Dad, look what he can do, you know what I mean? And it was like, so it's sort of that same concept though, you know what I mean? It was a lot harder to learn it, and the reward was greater. So
yes,
So I can totally see it. It makes sense from a gamer's point of view why we would want to do the tougher level and
Yeah.
get the bigger reward from it. It totally makes sense to me.
I'll tell you one thing that I know, that in my lifetime I was sent here to overcome fear and to become non-judgmental. Because anything that I ever judged anybody on, I've either had like myself or someone in my family or very close to me or whatever, and I've seen like every perspective of it. Like like there was the issue of child support. Like I went through a separation and they said it like negative $49 a month. My son went through it and he had like 2 days of a little bit of work and they said it at like $300 and something a month. And then my daughter's husband went through it and he was paying like $800 a month for a child that wasn't even his. And I've seen every angle of that. And so therefore I'm like not judgmental about it anymore. When I hear of someone that's not paying or something like that, it's like, I just, you know what I mean? It just makes it irrelevant. And that's happened to me with any subject that's controversial that you can think of. And
What's interesting? Whoops, I don't mean to cut you off.
I'm done.
I was going to say what's interesting about what you actually lived it from both points of view, or all these different points of view. But Ra actually talks about you don't have to do that. You can do it in your mind and learn lessons by working through things in your mind like that.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah,
meditation.
So I'm glad you brought that up because that's huge. I mean, because that really tears down the judgment that you have towards people if you just meditate on their perspective,
Mm-hmm.
And you can learn the lesson without having to sit in all of those, which could take years.
Go through it yourself, learn it the hard way.
Yeah. Exactly.
And
there's a part where he asks him about can fasting or Ra says it himself, and then he goes, "What do you mean fasting?" And Ra says, "Well, if you fast, you restrict your food intake with a very strong intention of I want to learn, I want to be more compassionate, or I want to stop judging myself, or whatever it is. You set a strong intention, and then you fast for however long. And every time that you feel hungry, you remember that this is a lesson you're trying to learn and you're sacrificing this." And he says, as far as consciousness is concerned, that's a very powerful way of refining your consciousness in a certain way.
So can you aim big? Like, I want complete enlightenment.
You can. I mean, enlightenment is so multifaceted, There's so many areas inside of our consciousness that we don't know about really until life brings them up. And from my experience on the awakening journey, it's been like almost like a checklist. You have all these issues that you need to balance inside of you, and it always starts from the most obvious one first, the biggest block in your consciousness holding you back from freedom. It'll start with that one, and your life will be all about that lesson until you learn that lesson, become free in that area. You go down to the next one and the next one.
Well, and every time you think you got it, something else comes out of the blue, and you're like, wait, oh my gosh, all of a sudden I'm put into this big thing of chaos. What am I supposed to do?
Yep. There's been so many times where I was like, oh man, I'm totally free. I got nothing left.
Yes, right.
And then something will come up and I'm like, whoa, that old trauma, that old bias, that old whatever.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like levels, you know what I mean? Because you'll get bombarded with a certain thing, and then you'll conquer it, and then you won't get that, but you'll get a whole nother slew of something that hits you, and then you're like, oh, I've clearly went into a different level. I've got to figure this out. And so, typically we get to the end of those levels and we feel like, oh, I got it, but then something else to work on.
But the cool thing is, this is what the Course talks about. There's things you can do to sort of cover everything with a broad brush, or maybe dig out some of the things that are lying dormant and hiding inside of you. And for me, I mean, the Course doesn't lay it out like this, but in my own experience, I have kind of found 3 big major issues or major steps to take if you want total freedom. And the first one is self-love, loving every part of yourself, accepting every part of yourself as equally valid, suppressing or rejecting nothing. Which, it's a step, but it's not that simple, right? It does take a lot of time and inner work to do that. Yeah. But self-love is the number one. And then forgiveness is the second big one. And this is just an absolute game changer. It's something that nobody really thinks about, but being able to see the whole world as innocent, as guiltless, as blameless, and not casting any judgment on anyone for anything, refusing to define anyone based on their ego, means that you will not define yourself based on your ego. You will not judge yourself for anything. And Jesus talks about this in the Bible. He says, judge not, lest you be judged, because the same exact measure that you judge someone else with will be measured back to you. And Christians, fundamentalists, think that means, oh, God's going to pour his wrath on you. What Jesus is talking about is that your ego will judge you by the exact same standard it judges everyone else.
Absolutely.
So forgiving the whole world becomes like the gates that open into heaven for total freedom. And then the third one is just practicing presence, practicing only this moment exists is so huge, because it's such a cliche in spirituality, but it could not be more powerful. Because if you're really present, if you think about what that means, it means you cannot be referencing or holding on to an identity. You cannot have an egoic identity present, because all identity is from the past, right? You cannot be judging yourself based on anything you've ever done, because all actions, all errors are in the past. Right now, you are perfectly free. You are perfectly whole and one with all that there is. So the more you can practice only this moment exists, the more freedom you'll feel. And all three of these things have layers and layers to them. But those three things for me are the biggest focus that will change your entire life, man.
Yeah, I've really been on that present thing. And, it works for the future, too, because a lot of times when we're resonating in fear, it's about something in the future, what's going to happen with this or that. But when you're present in the moment and you think, man, this moment is perfect. This moment is blissful. I'm here now. Everything's quite all right. You can't have fear at that state. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, maybe if a bear's charging you in the moment, but that's never really happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You might want to get up and jet away. But, yeah, typically the moment, even at a traffic light or stuck in traffic, you know what? Everything's great in this moment,
There are no problems in the present moment.
Right.
The mind creates problems, because the mind, basically when you say something is a problem, you're saying something is wrong with reality. Reality has gone awry, right? Which is the arrogance of the ego. There's never a problem. There are things to do. There's action to take. There's difficult catalysts. There's challenges, but everything is serving your highest good. And there is ultimately nothing to fear, right? Only an ego can fear something, because the ego sees itself as separate from everything. I'm all by myself out here. I have to look out for number one, when you're actually an extension of the source, of the creator, of the universe, and everything is supporting you. Even there is no death, right? There's just eternal, everlasting life from incarnation to incarnation. You're always safe. You're always protected. So there is never a problem unless you say that there is.
And then we create it right in our mind.
Absolutely.
So I hate to be the bringer of bad news, but that scripture you quoted, "Judge not, lest ye be judged," does not read that way anymore.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's never read that way. It is. It's I memorize. It's actually Matthew 7:1. It's now, "Judge not, that you be not judged." Lest isn't even in there, and that's where I learned that word, is from that scripture. I didn't even.
What translation?
Any of them. It just doesn't exist in any translation anymore. It was originally in King James, I believe.
Now, was that King James you just read?
Yeah.
Wow, what a trip.
Yeah, man. There'll be some that get you. You'll be like, yeah, I know. I know how it was, and
I had to come from somewhere.
The lion shall lie down with the lamb. It's
Does it quote it in the Course of Miracles? Does it quote that, or you just were saying that?
Not that I know of. No,
I was just wondering.
Yeah, "Judge not, that you be not judged."
Trippy.
So yeah, but it used to say, "Judge not, lest you be judged."
Yeah, for sure it did.
Yeah.
I remember doing that like kids' church.
So if that's 100%er for you, Google that and see that it doesn't exist in the Bible, any translation. And that'd be the one that gets you. Yeah, that'd be the one that gets you for sure. Because there's a few like that. Like, "The lion shall lie down with the lamb." I remember that one clearly. And
I'm so bad. I love telling people that the word "piss" is in the Bible, and they're like, "No, it's not." And I'm just like,
the word "piss" is in the Bible. But you know what? That's one that I always say. I remember as a kid saying "piss" and trying to get away with it, and I'm like, "It's in the Bible, Mom." And
yeah, I don't have that.
So it's always been in there for me.
Unicorn and Matrix being in there is really weird too.
Something about "he who pisseth upon the wall" is how it read, if I remember right.
Oh yeah.
Wow. There is no "lest" anywhere.
No. Welcome to the Mandela effect, my friend.
It's so fun.
That's a trippy, and that's so trippy. But
Where did I get that from?
And then when I think back, what you were talking about, with,
but everyone thinks it. That's what's really interesting.
Yeah, when you were talking about the law of one and merging into a social memory complex, sort of like Ra is, I would sort of imagine there would be some sort of memory anomalies like this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it could totally be a side effect of the shift that we
or density. Totally.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I was totally, when you were saying that, I'm like, man, that sounds like that could totally be the Mandela effect cause, or at least a contributing factor,
Only we could ask Ra. He would give us the answer.
Yeah. I feel like that all the time, man.
Where's Ra when you need him, huh?
Well, dude, I really appreciate you coming on again. And Sherry, are you?
I'm here. Yeah, no, I really appreciate you coming on because I don't know, I really experienced something during this. Really cool. Thank you so much. I'm gonna have to look through that. I've had a few like Daryl Berry Jr. and people like that have, I've been guided to kind of do that for a long time, and you put stuff off, but I need to take a look at it.
You'll be super glad you did.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
It's been a blast.
All right, buddy. I appreciate it. Lots of love and light to all of you guys in the chat and
much love, everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Peace. If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.